Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim, Sani. We're still going to be looking at companies that are deep in tech and deep in AI at that. Joining me in the studio is UrbanMetry's co-founder and CEO, Cha-Ly Koh. Cha-Ly, thanks very much for taking the time to speak with us, coming over to Koh Cha-Ly. Let's talk a little bit more about UrbanMetry and what do you guys do?
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Cha-Ly. I'm the CEO and founder of UrbanMetry. We are a city data company. We harvest, clean, using our proprietary algorithms, data that will help decision makers make better decisions on how we build cities, right?
Okay, what does that mean?
So companies like ours exist all over the world. Traditionally in developed countries, data is provided by government, and you can also get it from private sectors. When you come back to the developing countries, a lot of the developing countries have a lot of trouble adopting these technologies because the data source that they have, either from government or private, tend to be a lot more fragmented by different magnitudes, as well as not as clean as expected in developed countries because of our infrastructure. So we would usually look at things like demographics, movement, things that are built, anything that's built in the city, from housing to industrial to roads to water pipes to telco fiber that is being laid onto cities. We harvest everything that's built and everything that moves in the city. So when we do that, we are able to sort of co-layer a lot of this data to get insights out of it. A lot of developed countries have been doing this for many, many years, 20, 30, 40 years, because the government has invested in strong infrastructure, data infrastructure to make it clean, and people like data scientists or city planners can utilize that data. When I came back to Malaysia, we realized that this is missing, and substantial amount of effort needs to be put in to clean up that data to make it useful in the first place.
What kind of users does data have?
For our types of data, we hope to serve people who make bigger impacts to the city. So key stakeholders in city building includes real estate developers, governments, bankers, as well as anybody who's offering any kind of service and basic amenities to the city. So
we see countries like Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia have metropolitan cities. Many of them have population above 5 million, in fact 10 million, some of them like Bangkok and Jakarta. They've been doing okay without this data. So why is it important to have the data now in 2023?
Fantastic question. I think I was just coming back from the World Economic Forum, and we talked about sustainability developing the needs for these cities going forward. The cities that or the countries that you have just named and the cities that live in them are currently all at risk of flooding, right? Because we're all near coasts or we're near rivers, right? And on top of the flooding that's going to happen, we are also going to face in the next 30 years, due to climate change, shrinking amount of resources. So how we built the city in the past, which is, build and they will come. Basically, that's how developing countries like to think about this, is no longer an efficient and sustainable way for us as a human population to go forward. So all these developing countries with the needs and hunger to consume basic amenities in the city will need to do it in a far more efficient manner than they did last 50 years. And that's why data needs to be there to make sure that you are not wasting any of these resources by building things that will be abandoned or white elephants.
There are a lot of conversations in terms of how the cities were built in the first place. These are old cities. We're looking at Jakarta, 500 years old at least, Bangkok, about 300 years old, Manila, about 700 years old. These are old cities.
Fantastic, yeah.
It seems like it might be a daunting task in terms of trying to map out the kind of data that exists in these kind of cities. I mean, maybe not as old as, say, London, where it's about 2,000 years old, but still it's old. To a point where countries like Indonesia has even abandoned the whole Jakarta project and moved on to Nusantara. So the kind of solutions they are building, while admirable, is it really solving the problems of that particular city?
So there are short-term pain points and long-term pain points that we have to think about. In our context, both are very important because the people who are making the decisions today need to keep the city running, right? So I need to make sure that your water is running. I need to make sure your electricity is running. I need to make sure investments are coming in to support the economy, right? So all those things that's happening to the city will just become far more efficient, and city data is standard in most developed countries in the world and makes it a lot cheaper to run the city, right? So for short term, you need that city data as fast as possible. In the long-term basis, for example, flooding, right? People like in Jakarta, people in Thailand are all talking about most of the city sinking most of the year going forward. And key politicians or politicians have to look at the data in a deeper manner and say, what are our options? Without the data, you are guessing. And guessing long-term is much worse than having data to inform your long-term decision-making. I'm sure you agree, because
what kind of data is given? I know you were saying piping and all the other stuff, but honestly, like a decision maker looks at what, particularly the data that you are collating right now?
So the things that we like to collate and also make it as simple as possible and easy to digest for key decision makers are things like how the city is growing. Is it going north, south, east, west, southeast? Because infrastructure is very expensive to build. You can't build it everywhere. So how do you prioritize your resources, and what kind of initiatives are you going to invest in to get the biggest bang for your buck, right? So when they look at, for example, in Malaysia, okay, I'm going to zoom back to Malaysia, oversupply in housing. What's the key issue there? It's because there's no real big database out there that a decision maker can look at it and say, there's an oversupply here. I have an issue here that my resources are being wasted building affordable housing that nobody wants to buy. Where should I move my resources to build affordable housing that people will actually have a need for it? Very simple things like this that we take for granted and currently not available in all developing countries in Southeast Asia. And how are we going to really motivate them is by making that leap to use data as easy as possible so they actually use it and make better decisions for the benefit of the people who live in them.
The housing projects, for instance, is normally tied with governmental permits and governmental approvals. Sure. There's a lot of politicos going around saying that these are the kind of developments that is needed within that particular area. You're looking at urban-related politicians trying to approve as much projects as possible, even though there's not many people. So there's a lot of political will involved when it comes to human mobility and human population in cities.
Correct.
How are you going to negate this whole notion that the things that you want to do, admirable as it is, might not necessarily tally with the kind of political requirements of that particular city?
Fantastic question. And I think UrbanMetry doesn't represent ourselves as the solver of all problems, right? What we are trying to do is to collate the information and give it a base map. So then we are all arguing about the same thing and not arguing about facts on the ground. At this point, a lot of it is anecdotal. I met some Makcik Kia and she doesn't have a house. And that kind of discussion is not beneficial to anybody because we're not talking about facts. We're not playing on the same playing field. So it's almost going to war where every one of the generals are deciding where the hills are. That's crazy. So our role as UrbanMetry is to create the map. This is the map of the city. And as you debate among politicians who also have different opinions about the same subject, you're debating it on the same facts.
So who are you serving? The real estate folks or the politicians or the public?
So we generally do not have a politician client, but most of our clients are real estate developers, bankers, utility providers, as well as retailers now. And why we serve these clients? Primarily because a lot of them understand P&L, they understand balance sheet, and they understand the core fundamental things that drives risk. Whatever the politicians want, at the end of the day, these guys are providing the basic amenities for the city, and the risk of abandonment, waste of resources is real. It comes down to their balance sheet, and that's where we feel the impact is most made.
Let's talk about the valuation projects, particularly for homeowners right now. It serves the consumer market. Is UrbanMetry into that?
So we are not valuers. We're not licensed valuers. We do believe that auto valuation machines that's available in developed countries will eventually be a key driver for developing nations.
Okay, how is this different from Nowcast?
So Nowcast is AI-driven price forecast. So we are forecasting the price of the homes today.
So
It's
just now you were
different,
saying
yeah.
you're not valuers, now you're forecasting. Which one is
So
which?
okay, so let me just explain what's the difference between a valuation and what Nowcast. The biggest difference is for a valuation to be held through in the context of Malaysia anyway, is that you have to visit the house itself, right? So think about it as valuers or valuation is like a thermometer. You have to go to the house with a thermometer and you read the mercury,
Okay.
right? For us, we are weather forecasters like on the news. We are forecasting what's the home price of it in the afternoon, late in the evening. The accuracy of it is not specifically to the time and the place that the valuer visits. It is really at the what we are forecasting entirely using data. There's no human who goes there and look at it subjectively and think, I think this renovation should have a 20% increase, or I think this house is very, very dilapidated, so I give it a 10% discount. So there's no human who actually goes in and visits these properties. So that's the difference between a forecast and a valuation.
The thing about value and forecast is that sometimes it is subjective, particularly when you look at nostalgia, memorable moments, things like these that might not necessarily be captured in the AI machine that you're running.
Yep.
Unless you impute it yourself.
Correct.
If you have a house next to, say, for instance, Stadium Merdeka, it may be dilapidated. It's a bad area to be, to be spoken about. But generally speaking, there's some nostalgic element that might drive the projections up.
Yep.
So how do you manage this whole idea of subjectivity in terms of the data-driven AI that Nowcast has?
This is a fantastic question, and I would really like to address it because there's a very big difference between what I personally, as a home buyer or as an investor or etc., value a property because I see nostalgia, I see historical value, all these things, versus somebody who is financing it. So a finance value, right, might be different from what you value as a willing buyer, willing seller. Because I'm willing to pay for nostalgia, I'm willing to pay for cultural importance,
whatever.
etc. But should that be financed? That is a different question because the financier has different objectives. The financier needs to minimize risk, right? And how they do that should have different parameters, and then a person who is going to live in it, who's going to enjoy the property, who's going to enjoy the asset.
Okay, and with this, some of the financing companies that you're working with, RHB Bank is one of them. Any other banks?
So we do have a few more banks. I didn't check the NDA before this, so I'm not sure if I can have it on TV.
How is it like working with these banks?
Actually, we really are extremely excited, right? RHB Bank is not working with us on Nowcast, it's on a different product, just to clarify. But on the banks that are working with us traditionally on this new way of using AI, it's very exciting because we feel this data-driven product is making them understand how to look at their mortgage portfolio and be more responsible in lending to the home buyers and the mortgages that they give out, right? So for example, one of the things that we are very excited about working with the banks is that they are now paying attention to the mortgages that might get flooded. So in the new 2030 annual floods, we want to prevent some developers who maybe are too motivated to build townships in areas that will flood, right? So when we talk to bankers, they now pay attention to these things. Like if I'm going to give a bunch of mortgages, I might want to check if there's climate risk involved, physical climate risk involved. And when they start to check things like this, the beneficiary is the home buyer, the mortgage, because I'm now not responsible of paying a 30-year mortgage on something that might flood. And I, as an individual, might not have the knowledge, the power, or the capacity to understand this risk. And the banks are here to protect my interests, to make sure that that is minimized, because it's in their interest too.
Is climate risk concerned previously under the, I guess, underwriters' thinking process or the credit risk committee process? Were they even considering that this is part of the story?
Yeah, I think the whole physical asset risk of climate risk didn't come into the picture until the last 10 years. And even very recently when I was in the WEF forum, I attended several very, very high intellectual conversations between professors and politicians who are still debating what is the real impact of physical risk.
Have you decided? What is
actually,
the real?
No, actually, some are saying that it is priced in. So a lot of the bankers are saying that.
I doubt it. Right?
Yes, exactly. So a lot of the professors are like, it's not priced in. So the conversation is still at that level. And we are...
If it's priced in, folks in Jakarta would face a depletion of asset value.
Exactly, and then it will affect the bonds, it will affect government bonds,
Obviously.
obviously, right? But it's not priced in. So depending on who you are, people are still debating whether it's priced in or not, right? Because the loss given default has not come. We're talking about 20, 30 years down the road when the
But real
frequency
estate
increase.
developers, for instance, would look at their project value on time value of money over, say, 3 decades or 4 decades. Do you feel
not that far, but I think it's more like in a decade or two.
A decade or two,
Yeah.
okay. In that process, they would want to shore up that valuation of their project to be higher than what is necessarily the case. Am I right? The motivation
Actually,
is?
they are smarter than that now. I want to, not
Go
to
ahead.
defend my clients, but I think people are getting a lot more sophisticated, right? So they have a lot of land. Some of them have no land or they're hunting for land. So there's 2 types of property developers.
Yeah, those with land banks.
Those with land banks, they are actually a lot more pragmatic now. They're not going to fight reality, right? Like data is really something that's very powerful. They realize the power of data. With the information, they can now strategize better. So it's not just about, I have a piece of land, I put 5,000 condos there, times a mall, times a office, have 2 billion GDVs listed online. That's maybe something you do 20 years ago,
Okay.
10, 20 years ago. Those who are our clients and have become a lot more sophisticated, they realize they can balance the risk across different land banks and strategize them properly.
Are you providing that kind of solution for them?
We're
to
providing
create
data.
This kind of, I don't know how to call it, a weighted risk calculation measurement of the GDV?
So we run the data for all of the land banks, but how they balance the risk across is really the geniuses in the company themselves, because they have their information that we won't know internally. How good are their marketing doing? What is the projection of the strategy? What are targets? I know none of those. I'm a data provider. But they have gotten so sophisticated these days that they are able to consume my data, and sometimes I think that they're even far further ahead than me and have some strategies that's beyond me, but they're asking very difficult questions and collecting that data to make sure that those are calculated internally.
And so is it true that you guys have 150 corporate clients?
We have 150 corporate clients. I'm not sure if that's right, but we have 40 live clients every year at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's move on to application of artificial intelligence in your work. Do you feel that that is the moment right now for you to seize, and how are you going to gear up your team in terms of preparing the AI solution in your framework?
So we are already AI ready from a while ago, right? As I mentioned, Nowcast is AI. It's trained using machines, and it's coming out with its own error testing whether how correct it is, right? But we also use AI in other methods. One is we count houses using satellite images. So we were, before this new age of everybody pouring money into generative
Why not
AI,
title deeds, which is more absolute?
It's not complete. So interesting question, because one of the reasons why we even built the AI to count the houses in the first place was when we looked at the deeds, the residential house deeds.
Pejabat tanah lah.
Not pejabat tanah, but so pejabat tanah, but there's another source for it as well. So
Okay.
anyway, so let's say land use. Your house, this piece of land has to be residential title to have a house on top, right?
Okay.
That's an assumption. But when we first counted it, we realized, this is a project in Muar, by the way. In Muar, it was like 50,000. We have existing houses, 25,000. But I have 50,000 families.
Okay.
So if you drive around in Muar, I don't have half of the population living on
Yeah.
the streets, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. And it turns out that in Malaysia, you can actually build houses on agriculture land, and you can get water, electricity,
Fed through the
everything, like full basic amenities, but actually it's
sanitation.
still, sanitation is still agriculture land. So on title, it's agriculture, but you're allowed to build 2 structures, right? So this is from the British Times. So we never changed that. And so the council actually doesn't have record as a house here. You're paying agriculture land tax. Cukai Tanah is agriculture.
Wow.
So can you imagine? I have like
How
I'm missing.
prevalent?
Yeah.
How prevalent is this? I mean,
And
this
it-
is Muar. I mean, like.
Yeah, this is
What about other cities?
most cities in Malaysia, right? I mean, because we think of it as Klang Valley, where all the houses are like this nice double-story terraces, right?
Yeah.
But you have kampongs or old villages or things that are along the river.
Or semi-rural lah, like
semi-rural lah, or even Sekinjan area,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it turns out to be a lot of the stock. So that's why we built the AI, because we needed to count them. And that's how we found 27,000 houses, additional houses in Muar that basically matches it.
What is done with these kind of revelation that you have, surfaced?
We are able to then properly ascertain our supply and demand, whether it's accurate or not, right? Whether it reflects the reality on the ground. So when we build AIs like this, suddenly we no longer have to find 5 humans or 50 humans to go and say how many houses are there.
Like a typical traditional census
Correct.
by DOSM.
But so the biggest difference here is census requires a lot of money and you can only do it every 10 years because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
With technology today, you can do a census every 6 months, right? You can do a census every 6 months. You can
Yeah, maybe the physical building counting, but not the human beings within it. So the household size.
There are other sources for this, right? So in other countries, we're starting to see people using mobile data, movements data, to actually look at where demographics move.
Okay, which now brings about that idea of privacy and how are you going to manage or work around trying to get the data, but in an ethical way, in a
Correct.
legal way.
So one of the 3 pillars here at UrbanMetry that we really believe in, 1, sustainability is top of all agenda. Second is ethics and privacy. So it's because we are a data company that we're extremely aware of the idea of ethics and privacy first. When we collect data, we are very, very careful about only collecting aggregated, anonymized data. So anything that sits in our database, you can't even, there's no individual data.
How are you going to, verify that you're doing things ethically?
Okay, so we
like
actually have
auditing your work, something like that.
yeah, so we don't have the resources currently to hire a big 4 like PwC, but periodically when our clients look under the hood to see the data, we collaborate with them to, showcase to the world that we are ethical and we are doing it properly. So one of the examples is World Bank was one of our clients, and they came in, they not audited, but they were our clients, so they had to see under the hood, how are you managing the data, etc. So they see how we actually process the information, for example, when we did that piece.
Do they call you out sometimes? No?
It's stressful when they ask you how you do the calculations, right? And so
would
you
they
have to
understand
explain.
the answer if provided?
Oh yeah, I mean these are really really sophisticated.
So you got 3 pillars. First is sustainability. Second is ethics and privacy. What's the third pillar?
So the last one obviously is we are motivated to make sure that whatever that we do, it needs to be people, which I said ethics, planet, sustainability, and profits. We are a for-profit entity. We're not an NGO.
Speaking of which, so you raised 2 million last year by Monkey Ventures led.
Yes.
This year, is there any fundraising round?
No, currently we are not fundraising because the resources that we have gotten from Monk's Hill is sufficient for the targets that we want to reach now. And I personally would like to reach those targets before I go back to the market. That said, we have made some progress in some of the new products that we have started. And maybe that schedule can be moved forward, but too early to say now.
So to scale your company right now, is it more of geography growth, or is it offerings and deepening these kind of offerings within the geographies that you're already operating in?
Okay, the answer is more both. So we have recently entered Thailand. So we just secured a client. Thailand and finished delivering our product. We are now in Vietnam already. We have also served in Japan before. We're hoping to be in Indonesia. So these are all organic current BAU growth, usually led by satisfied clients who bring us abroad as they invest abroad.
Oh, so you use them as connectors?
Yeah, so
what about regulatory risk and government risk in entering these kind of markets?
So for our kind of data, or because as I mentioned, we don't take anybody's personal data. So a lot of it is city data. We just do it a lot more efficiently, and we are collating fragmented data.
Would these cities be amenable to your requests then? I mean, Malaysia, I didn't see any problem, but
so a lot
Thailand or you go to Jakarta, they'll be like, what is UrbanMetry?
A lot of the data that we work with are public data. So think of it as something in a museum, right? Very valuable, like a piece of art. But sometimes you find in flea markets, people don't think it's very valuable because it's covered with layers of dust. It is sort of abandoned from somebody's house, right? UrbanMetry's technology is really to unveil the layers of dust that's caking on top of the art. And then we make it suddenly usable and valuable again for the people who are using it. So a lot of times we start working with things that people don't think is important. For example, our Nasi Lemak Index. Our Nasi Lemak Index basically maps where your warung soup is, where your kopitiam and your char kway teows are, where your bak kut tehs are, where your...
the street food lah.
Yeah, but it reflects so much about your local population's culture, eating behaviors, and size of your local populations. But if you go to Thailand today and say, oh, I'm going to map out where all you guys sell pad thai, for example, nobody would think that's something that I need like regulatory approval, right? But it's so valuable.
Yeah, because you can then work on secondary information from that particular
Correct, and then we start layering it on official government
this is
data.
Crazy.
So this is what we do. So we
How big is your team?
We're about 40, 42.
Is that a right size?
We're hoping to grow. Talent is hard because I also have certain...
Are they mostly what, data scientists or whatever you call them?
Yeah, so data, our data team is the largest, okay, 20 odd. We also have about 10 to 15 tech guys.
Oh, tech.
And then ops and everybody else is about 10. 5 to 10. Some people are
I wish you nothing but the best. Growth
so
ahead. And of course, more of this data, if you can make it public, like, newsletters, something like that will be beneficial for people like me.
Yeah, so just a last note, sustainability, some of our work like sustainability index, etc., we have made it for consumers. So I can send you a link, you can test it out. You can actually generate a sustainability report for your own house.
Fantastic. That was Cha-Ly Koh, the founder and CEO of UrbanMetry. If you want to learn more, just head on to their website. If you want to learn more about these kind of episodes, just head on to astroawani.com. There are plenty of resources like this that can be found there. My name is Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.